or because debate actually is war, but my lecture is broken down as battle. So the first part is know thy enemy, second part is know thyself, third part is know your stuff, and the fourth part is to battle, which I think is largely because I've played way too much Kingdom Rush. But that's the basic outline of what we're going to talk about. A lot of people only think about their own side of debate. You think a lot about what you do to prepare. And sometimes we're a little too focused on what we do to prepare as opposed to what we do to prepare against our enemies. Right? So it's an important part of this. But before I talk about any of the sort of logistics of it, it's really super important, and the first step of any tournament prep is to set your goal. And by this I mean you should have a very concrete understanding of what you want to achieve at that tournament, because it changes the way that you should prepare. So for example, if your goal is to get to the bid round and get a bid to the TOC, and sorry, is the public forum kids in here?
Yeah.
Okay. I know nothing about the structure of your debate. I'm really hoping to minimize the policy jargon stuff so that this is useful for you as well, but I'll caveat it that way at the beginning. I'm sorry in advance. Hopefully some of this means something. So, first part is set your goal. So, your preparation for a tournament is going to be different depending on whether or not you want to win the whole tournament, and then you're like, okay, I have X number of elimination rounds that I have to win, and those are single elimination where I'm probably going to face X opponent, or I want to make it to the octos because that's the TOC bid, and that's what I want to get to, and so I need X amount of new arguments to get there. It's a very different structure of what you're preparing for. Or maybe it's just like, I want to beat this team. Like, maybe that's your goal in some ways. And a lot of us have that set of teams that you're used to sort of like losing. So we had a coach come in this past year who was like, our teams were preparing for different kinds of bubble rounds. So we knew there was a set of, not the like top tier teams, but this set of middle tier teams that we kept sort of being on the cusp of winning or losing against. And so we focused our preparation against those. Not against the top tier teams where we would do our best but maybe wouldn't win those rounds, but against the ones where it was going to really make a difference in our tournament outcome, whether or not we had prepared really well for those middle level rounds. Does that make sense? So knowing what your goal is for a tournament is really big and really important for what kind of preparation you're doing. So in terms of warfare, the first step, and I actually started with this on purpose, is know thy enemy. Not know thyself first, but know thy enemy. An immense amount of tournament prep that I think doesn't happen nearly as much in high school is think about the people that you're trying to beat. Right? Debate is about two different teams debating each other, not just like how pretty you talked, because then everybody would win. The hair swoosh really is quite impressive. I haven't noticed quite as much until now. Bravo, Kwam. Okay. So the first part of knowing thy enemy is intel gathering. Debate is like any other activity where it matters whether or not you have intelligence about your opponent. Football programs watch video of their opponents. Video has sort of made it into college. You can easily, and you should ask before you do it, but you can easily record your rounds. Every one of you has a computer that's capable of recording whatever round you're in. You can find some sort of software. I'm sure there are programs. I don't know crap about computers, but I bet there's a way you can record your voice on your computer and probably record your opponent if you ask them if that's okay. Having intelligence and gathering that stuff about your opponents is really super important when you start preparing. So for example, an immense amount of the preparation that I did this year for the national debate tournament, we talked about as much about our opponents as we did about ourselves. We talked a ton about how we thought they debated, how they prepared. Obviously, the kind of affirmative you're reading against certain teams might change if you have the option. A team that's super K-leaning, you might sort of take out your like giant hedge impact and have some softer impacts in there that are kind of like nicer to debate the K. Or maybe you just want a giant hedge advantage, which is we did against the K. So whatever it is, knowing what your opponents like to do is really important for how you structure and debate that argument. And you can't do that without gathering intelligence on them. The first step of that is to make a list. Like I literally start almost every tournament prep with a list of teams that I'm preparing against in particular. So that might be the list of the 10 best teams in your area. That might be the list of those bubble teams that you really need to beat. But a list of teams that you're going to focus on is really helpful, because otherwise you're just like, I want to know everything about everybody, and that's impossible. Okay? So how do you gather intelligence? How many of you guys use the wiki? Yeah, so that's like 50%-ish, maybe 60. Okay, so there is like a high school wiki that is where people should post their sites and post the arguments that they're running. Or if you're like following college trends, like post full speech documents. Or if they're open source, they like have all their cards in there. Okay? The wiki is super, super important for your preparation against other teams and having intelligence about the kind of arguments they like to read. Okay, how many people are terrible/hate cross-ex? Okay, I've watched you guys practice debate. There should be a lot more hands up. Some of you guys are not asking real questions. You want to know a really good way to like have some questions to ask other teams? It's like think about their arguments ahead of time. You know, it's not just like you can prepare your answers to arguments, but you can also think about like how you're going to deliver stuff in the debate round. Okay, so using the wiki. If the team is annoying and they don't use the wiki and they haven't posted anything, which by the way, if you guys do that, you should start posting your stuff. It's good for debate. Everybody debates better when there's good intel for everyone. Okay, the second part is like you can email and or Facebook these people. Like you're probably Facebook friends with 1 billion times more debate people than you actually know. So if somehow their name shows up on your list of teams to beat, like Facebook message them. I do this all the time. I don't have your email address, but like I'll Facebook message somebody to be like, hey, what were your 2 and R's at the last tournament? Like what arguments did you read? Okay, so intelligence gathering is proactive. And it's not just like skim through the wiki on occasion. It's like, let's get in touch with these people and find out what sort of arguments they have. Videos or recordings are awesome. You learn so much more by watching a full debate instead of just looking at the cards they've read. So if you can, start videotaping your opponents. Talk to your teammates. Even if you haven't debated a team, your teammates probably have. And that's super important to understand like what went wrong, what could have been done better. Okay? So the second part of this is once you know your enemy, plan your attack and tailor it towards your enemy. So like, what are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? What is the best offensive strategy that accounts for your opponent's weaknesses and your strengths and how those match up, right? So this team knows nothing about the K. I happen to be pretty decent at the K. I don't. This is a hypothetical. I happen to be pretty decent about the critique. So maybe running a K or planning to go for a K against this team is a good idea. Like, X partner is not as technically proficient. Maybe I want a really techie, like, topicality debate, whatever. So thinking about your strategy in relationship to your opponent is super helpful for making it better. Okay? Any questions about knowing thy enemy? Does anybody, like, feel like they proactively have tried to search out how their opponents debate? Like, sort of, sometimes. Putting that near the top of your list will massively upgrade the way that your debate prep goes. Okay? Okay, the second part is know yourself. So I'm going to do a third part that's about sort of the substance of the debate stuff you're preparing, but the know thyself part is just kind of like the basics. Focus on your weaknesses. We had a debater that was on the Northwestern team who was a senior when it was my freshman year, and he came up to me at some point after he graduated, and he was like, the thing I wish I'd done the most was like actually do the thing I'm worst at and prepare for it. So he hated debating the K. I bet a bunch of you guys are like that. Like, no. Like, you kind of hate debating the K, so that's the thing you don't prepare. You, like, spend all your time on your policy stuff because it's way more fun because you actually know what you're doing. Yeah. So he was like, this guy worked harder than anybody I've ever seen in debate, but he also, like, focused on the thing that he liked doing, which was policy debate. And then he kept losing to the K, like, repeatedly. Like, of their affirmative losses, it was like 95% of them were to the K. And it was just the thing he least wanted to prepare because it wasn't fun. Like, we all hate doing the thing that we're really bad at, okay? Know yourself. Make your list of weaknesses and put those at the top of your list of things to improve on. If you keep beating people on politics, you probably don't need to do a bunch of politics practice 2MCs. You probably need to do some practice on some other kinds of arguments to be able to beat your opponents. So that's the thing that's like the hardest to convince yourself to do, which is like prepare your weaknesses. If you know you're not particularly clear, a bunch of speed drills where you just speak as fast as you possibly can, probably not all that helpful. The pen drill or the A drill where you try to speak more clearly, a lot more helpful. Okay? So know yourself and be realistic about your weaknesses. If you can't figure them out for yourself, feel free to ask your lab leaders or your coaches. We probably have some thoughts. The second part of know thyself is, like, take care of yourself. Okay, so this is sort of silly, but sleep before tournaments. Like, I'm not really sure why this is so uncool to high schoolers / college people. Arjun 1.0 is my partner this year and last year, and Arjun doesn't like to sleep. It took me like a full year and a half, not that Arjun. That Arjun might not sleep either, but my Arjun doesn't like to sleep. It took me like a full year and a half of like yelling at him to be like, no, seriously, you have to sleep. If you want the studies, I'll send you the studies, but you need more than 8 hours every night. At least 8, if not more, every night. And if you get less, you operate like a drunk person. Like, the studies are awesome. It's really the only thing I had to play against Arjun. I was just like, listen, it doesn't matter. And the funniest part about this is it doesn't matter how much caffeine you drink. Okay? The stats on this are great. It doesn't matter how much caffeine you drink. It does not matter if you sleep 14 hours on the weekend to make up for your sleep deficit. If you spend a week getting less than 8 hours of sleep, you operate like someone who is just trashed. Okay? Like drunk in a debate round. Okay? So don't do that. None of you should know what that's like, but it's not good for debate. Okay? It's bad. You should have seen people like that maybe. Alright, so sleep is really, really important. Okay? At tournaments and before tournaments. Okay? So spending Friday night before the tournament starts, staying up until 2 a.m. to cut like 10 extra cards, 0% useful when in the morning you're like falling asleep during prep time. Okay? Get actual sleep. I could not stress this more. I have slept like an old person my entire life. Like I sleep at like 10 o'clock and then I wake up at like 9-ish. I get a bunch of sleep. I sleep like a baby actually because babies sleep like inordinate amounts of time. But that's scientific. You actually need it more. You guys are younger than me, so you actually need even more sleep. Teenagers need like close to 10 hours of sleep every night because you're like growing and I don't know. I'll send you the cards if you really want to know. Okay, so the 8 hours thing is actually for adults. Teenagers, you guys are supposed to get like even more sleep than that. Yeah, which none of you do. Okay, so no more of that. I spent a lot of time talking about the sleep thing, but like seriously, the amount that your brain functions on sleep is just way more than any prep could ever fix. Okay? Stop staying up till 3 a.m. Okay? The other part of this is like eat well, okay? If you're like the nervous person at tournaments, so we have an adorable, wonderful debater on our team this year, Evan McCarty, who like can't eat at tournaments, which is really bad. And he really needs to fix this, and I love Evan, but like he needs to find a way to learn to eat. If you're one of those people who like gets really nervous at tournaments and doesn't eat, you gotta find a workaround. Like, you gotta do it. So Arjun drinks a lot of blue Gatorade, which he claims has calories in it, which is like sort of true, but doesn't make it food. So don't do that. Evan tried these like goo things that runners use, so he doesn't have to like actually eat food. He just eats these like goo things that are the equivalent of food but look disgusting. Find your alternative. So actually what Evan does now is just drinks a bunch of smoothies, which are like a lot of fruit and actually do something, and it means that he's not really eating, but it like gives him food sustenance or whatever. Chewy bars, like whatever it is, fruit snacks, bananas. If there's something you can eat at a tournament, make sure you find it and like have enough of it. Eat food. Please eat food. Because at the end of a really long debate day when you're slagging, like part of that is because you don't have enough calories in your body because you've just been nervous and like not eating food for days. Not okay. Don't do that. Eat food. Okay? So taking care of yourself, sleep, eat well, do the like normal functioning things that your parents tell you you're supposed to do. Okay, do those for debate tournaments because your physical functioning actually matters. Alright, know thy stuff. And this is the part that most people focus on, and it's obviously super, super important. But like, know your stuff. Have your weapons prepared. Okay? First part of this is evidence, and I'm not going to harp on it because you've spent a bunch of time preparing your evidence and doing research, and a research lecture is like a separate and super, super long thing. So, you know, do your research, prepare evidence. Obviously, if you have no evidence when you show up at a tournament, you have nothing you can win with. So do that a bunch. But the thing that people don't do as much, and my head coach really likes to say there are a lot of ways to win the NDT. So there are a lot of ways to win rounds. And some people love cutting cards, and they're great at that, and that's what they focus their time on. I hate cutting cards. This is like not really a secret. I was going to say it's a big secret, but it's not. I hate cutting cards. I'm happy to tell anyone. I had to teach myself to like that part of it. That was one of the like know your weaknesses thing. Spent a lot of time trying to learn to cut cards. But what I do love is all the other preparation stuff that you get to do. Some of you are like, what other preparation stuff? Great question. Okay? So after you cut all of those cards and your teammates cut all those cards, which like, let's be honest, some of you guys are cutting like 10 cards, which is fine. So there's less of you to mess with, but So what are the things that we do when after cards are cut? Like, what do you do with a file to, like, get ready for a tournament? Or some of you guys just, like, lock and load, like, I have my gun, I don't need to practice shoot it? No, you, like, need some target shooting, right? Nobody likes my metaphor. Okay, what is, anyway. Thank you, whoever said that. Tate, thanks. So what do you guys do? Besides cut cards before a tournament, what do you do? Anyone?
You practice with that evidence.
Ah, you practice with that evidence. Yeah, so like practice speeches, practice debates. Those aren't just things that we do at camp. Those are things you can do before tournaments. They're even better because it's like your team knows your evidence really well and they're probably going to attack it really well, and it's good to have that constructive work. Stop touching his hair. It's weird. I don't know what's going on here, but it's weird. Scoot forward, Ty. You just look like that crazy dude from,
Twilight. Edward Cullen.
no, like so not even close to what I was going to say. There's like some Asian dude who hangs upside down in trees and... What's up, sweet stuff? This might be like, well, I mean, I know it's before your time because it's before my time. Is it in Sweet 16? Not 16 Candles is what I mean by that. There's like an old the like Asian dude that hangs upside down in the trees. Okay, when you did that with your hair, that's what you look like.
We're all gonna watch 16 Candles.
Am I totally crazy? Is it that movie? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's a Molly Ringwald movie that has this Asian character in it that hangs upside. Wow. Okay.
She found it, I think.
That one?
Yeah, I'm so glad I've been wildly destructive to my own lecture, but yes, that is what I mean. I think.
And we're on coffee, so distraction.
Yeah, me too. I dude was like double shot this morning, and I was like, yes. Okay, we're gonna rein it back in. If you want to, you're welcome to Google the 16 Candles thing.
No, just Google Asian man hanging upside down.
So that might not even be the right Asian man, which makes us all a little offensive here. Okay.
Look, I also bought a bunch of monkeys hanging upside down.
You're killing me, Tate. Okay, pull it together.
Wait,
Practice speeches, practice debates. Tate, close your computer.
But I brought up a picture of Obama.
You won't cross the line.
Oh god.
Okay, let's all contain ourselves. I've lost total control.
Okay,
You're talking about
So
you might hate cutting cards.
No,
practice
practice
evidence.
evidence.
Thank you. Okay, practicing with your evidence. So, you cut cards, you want to practice with them. The other thing you can do is highlight those cards, which is kind of an old school thing because now you guys all highlight on the computer, but re-highlighting cards is immensely important. Because if somebody else has highlighted that card, you probably have read it 0 times when you walk into a debate. What are the chances you know what that card actually says? The warrants behind that card. Sorry, this is so policy jargony and I feel bad. There's like a back row of people just staring at me. I got nothing. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really hope some of this translates a little bit. Okay, nice. I don't know if you guys highlight. Do you highlight your evidence? No. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so, hey, bring it back in. So my point is that if somebody else cut that card or found that piece of evidence, the chances that you know what it says if you've never read it before are like 0. 0. Okay? You guys have got to read your cards before the round happens, because you know what happens in a lot of your speeches? You're like, hey, I have this card, and you extend it by the tag, and then you have nothing left to say. So you finish your speech with like an extra minute.
Story of my life,
Okay? Yeah, so you're like running out of things to say. You know what's totally awesome when you've cut the file? It's like you know what all those articles are about and you know what the card says, and so you can just talk about the warrants and the substance of it. It's not just like economic decline causes war. You're like, listen, here are some historical examples of times when it increases the propensity for conflict. It means that interdependence declines, and thus there's more likely to have an incentive for war because you no longer have sort of the economic ties that prevent them. Right? That's a lot more to say than just like economic decline causes war, but the only way you're going to know that's what that card says is if you spent the time to either read it or re-highlight it or practice debate with it and try to learn the substance of your arguments. So it's not enough just to have the cards. You have to know what the cards say. And that was like one of my favorite parts. It was like going, because I didn't cut the cards, so they were basically never cards I knew because they were my files, cards everybody else got, which was great. But that meant that it required a lot of file reading on my part to figure out what everyone else's card said and get on top of the arguments themselves. Okay, so highlighting your files and knowing your arguments is really super important. If you don't have time to re-highlight your files, as in like when you go back through and you're highlighting it down, that's important. But if you don't have time to go all the way through a file and do that, I sometimes outline a file at the top of it. This is kind of a weird personal quirk, but at the top of the file there's often like a notes page. Under there, I'll do an outline of like basic author names and the like warrants in their argument. If you just kind of outline that for like the 1NC and major 2NC blocks, you know what you can do when you start prepping your rebuttals? You like copy and paste sections of the author names into your 2NR speech, and then you don't have to go back through and be like, what was the name of that author again? I don't remember what that card said. You like have it written out ahead of time, and you have the substance of that argument already put somewhere. And if that's all at the top of the file, that's true for your partner too, that's true for other people on your team. You have like a cheat sheet about your cards in a way that's way more efficient than just having to scroll back through old speeches and re-remember what all your cards say. This probably applies to public forum too. Having an outline of all of the evidence that you've read ahead of time probably makes it way easier than having to like skim back through and find your various cards that are sort of embedded in the speech. I don't know if that actually made any sense, but it seemed like a good idea. Outlines of all your cards really, really help later on. Okay? The last thing I have, well, I also chart my files. So if you are on a big squad that has like a bunch of different evidence, I start making a chart, and this chart might look different depending on who you are and how your files are constructed. But for example, there are different countries in this year's policy topic. I would probably have a chart that was something like each of the countries. Okay, and then different mechanisms for apps, or different DAs and counterplans. So like, that plan is terrible. There we go. Okay, like DAs, counterplans, T arguments. Because sometimes if somebody breaks a new app against you, it's like hard to remember all the stuff you have that actually applies to that affirmative. But if you have a cool chart, I'm really dorky, so I like charts. This is just something I do. I'm not sure all that many people do this, but it helps me a lot. If you have a chart that has like, here are all your DAs that apply to Venezuela and Cuba and whatever, you might have like a generic one that's just like generic against new apps, right? You like make a chart, it's a lot easier to visually and quickly understand what to pull and what to prepare for the 1NC. You might even have like a 1NC document. This is something I did for the NDT. Is like have a 1NC doc already constructed that's like your generic Venezuela 1NC. So when a new app gets broken against you and it's Venezuela, you've already put a bunch of the stuff you need into that document, right? So then you can just delete some of the files, some of the off case you don't want to read. You've already got a lot of your stuff pulled, and it saves you a ton of prep time, okay? I don't know if people read new affirmatives against people in public forum. Is that a thing? Kind of?
They have different cases.
A new case. Do people read new cases against you in public forum? Yeah. No, in the middle of a tournament.
They're like resolution changes from month to month, so they always have
Okay.
to.
So this might not apply, but if there's an unpredictable, if there's an element of not being able to predict stuff, and it's important to be able to respond quickly, having your stuff already structured so you're like, if they say X set of things, I have X set of arguments that apply, or these pieces of evidence that I can use effectively against them is really super helpful. Right? None of this is just cutting cards. It's like getting your stuff organized to minimize the time it takes you to get prepared in a debate round. And all of those seconds start adding up and give you a lot more time against your opponents. Okay, so things like charts and plans against different teams. Right? Think about your 1NCs against different AFs. Okay, there's way too many camp tournaments where I watch people take prep for 1NCs, and it boggles my mind. Like, just make your 1NC ahead of time. And you can do that in a broader sense for the rest of the year. Make your 1NC ahead of time. You're probably going to have to change your case arguments a little bit, but like pull it together so you have a Venezuela 1NC when somebody breaks a new Venezuela app against you. Yeah.
Is it like, would you say that it's a decent idea to have like a generic, like just like 1NC ready to go, and then like, so let's say I have like a politics generic, and then like I insert specific links when I come to the round, but I have that like just shell already ready to go, like politics case, DA.
Yeah,
Okay.
I definitely had so I had a generic Venezuela specific, or it wasn't
like
Venezuela, but yeah, I had a document that had 1NCs. We had really big header things that were like pockets. So I actually just had a pocket that was like Venezuela pocket, whatever. And you would have a 1NC ready to go so that when you needed to pull together your new 1NC, you didn't have to go to 10 different files to start putting it all together. You like already have, you know, the set of things I know I'm going to put in there. I already have those in one spot and I can just stick them in. See how that like dramatically reduces the amount of time you have to spend doing it? All right, so have your stuff super organized and charted and prepared in a way that helps minimize your prep time. Have backups. This isn't really a know your stuff thing. This is just like a be paranoid. The Wednesday before the NDT started on Friday, my whole computer died. Just like kaput. So it does happen. People always warn you about that stuff and they're like, no, back it up. No, seriously, back up your stuff. So if that means work off the Dropbox version of your stuff, how many of you guys use Dropbox? Yeah, a bunch of Dropbox people. So yeah, like save your stuff to Dropbox at the end of every day.
What did you do? Did you have?
It was a very long process. There used to be still a sticker. So this is the one that died on me. And I sent it in and they like tried to fix it and then they still didn't fix it. There were like 3 different computers I used over the course of 2 days that I just like reformed to make them work for me. They thankfully got my documents off of it that I had worked on for a day and a half, but there was only a day and a half of work, but it was like, 16 at least hours of work that I had not saved up to anything else or emailed to myself. So it would have been really awful to have to spend the like day before the NDT redoing a bunch of stuff that I had done the days before. So save your stuff. Yeah. They eventually fixed it and my computer showed up to me on like Sunday or so. And I used somebody else's computer before that. But it does happen. Like those horror stories, I like never really believed them. It was like, no, my computer's working fine. Like I didn't really think about it that much. I really wish I had had better habits about just saving my stuff and I would have had way less anxiety about it because it just would have been fine and I would have already saved it. Somebody's getting emails. Know your stuff, watch videos. Okay, so who knows, well, you were in the middle of a lecture, but who knows the really big news story that happened like an hour ago? Yeah? Tate?
Rights for life.
Yeah!
And Proposition 8 has been banned. So California
And the voting stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so major Supreme Court decisions getting rolled out this week. Voting Rights Act, sadly, well, depends on how you were. Yeah, so that kind of got screwed. There were some sad things, there were some good things. Depends on how you feel.
This week
Can you
has
explain that a little bit? Because I'm thinking, like, are they requiring more ID photos? Or what is going on?
So the Voting Rights Act was put in place as a result of the civil rights movement to a certain degree and made certain restrictions that applied largely to southern states. This is my basic understanding, which is not very good understanding of this, but so applied certain restrictions and methods of checking that the way districting and the way that the voting was happening in southern states was done sort of like neutrally and safely. They overturned parts of those requirements for the states to like triple check any changes that they were doing and make sure that it wasn't done for sort of like reasons that incorporated race. Does that make sense? So there were like parts of it, they were like overturned Section 4 but left Section 5 and they were like, and Section 2 still says you can't discriminate, so it should cover everything, but it is a little sad, depending on how you feel about it. Okay, so the like know thy stuff thing, it's not just stuff you cut, it's news. Read the news, okay? Like find a way, and in particular, okay, so I asked my lab this, so my lab's not allowed to respond. Who knows the like big story about Brazil right now? Okay, which part of like my lab is not allowed to respond? Doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah?
So there's like protests all over Brazil and people are like leaving because they're gonna miss the World Cup and it's like, they're not ready. They're not ready for this.
Fair. Why are they protesting? Stop it. Let me try something out. Okay, so that's not bad. There are protests in Brazil, like maybe important on a big topic about Central and South America. Sorry, I know this is not the public forum topic, but.
South Africa's campus kind of engagement with Latin America.
Oh, is this one? Nice. Sick. Okay. Yeah, so super important to stay on top of the news, especially for what will often be very timely debate topics. Okay? So, how many people have Twitter? Yeah. How many people's Twitter is like 90% celebrities and your friends? Yeah, like way more of you than you're actually confessing to. Like 90%. Okay. So I'm not saying like you need to make your Twitter into the Twitter of like a 40-year-old person, but it's not a bad idea to just stick a bunch of stuff on your Twitter that quickly gives you the news, because it's maybe the least effort you have to put into like staying on top of things happening. So whether that's the New York Times or SCOTUS or whatever you want to put on there, try throwing like a couple of news things in there, and it makes your life so much easier for gathering news. Have a like daily feed. So the other part of this is like for tournament prep purposes, have a Google Reader equivalent that's a bundle of different sources and searches. You can just, okay, in the research lecture you guys learned about making Google alerts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so you can send there's no Google Reader anymore. But I'm sure that you can send your Google alerts to a different feeder. Okay? You can just package a bunch of stuff that shows up and funnels all into one thing that you just read that page, and it will give you your set of searches on Google, right? Set up a Google alert that shows up in that page, and then you have your news about the region, right? So everybody should be doing this because it makes you way more intelligent sounding in the rounds, because you actually know what's happening in the region. Okay, so for example, you should all know about protests or whatever else is going on, negotiations. Major legislative acts in the United States probably matter for politics DAs. Stuff like that will make you sound way better about your stuff. And that's not just like know your own evidence. You don't have to be cutting cards from all these sources, but like know what's going on in the world, and it will massively increase the amount that you understand debate. Okay? Yeah.
When I did debate on a subject, what do you say that I do? Because like, let's say if I go and I pick out cards and say, I get messed up, checked up, and it's not my fault because I didn't want what the one to pick the cards. Those are the ones instead that I wanted to go with. Like, how do is there a way to recover from that? So basically what happened was that the cards that were pulled was basically benefiting the affirmative side.
So there are ways to recover in rounds. This lecture is largely about stuff you can do before the round happens, but in terms of whatever arguments you've presented, if you want to sort of backtrack from that, there are ways to find outs, which is largely to look for your best offensive argument that you have constructed that goes your direction. All right, so know yourself, know your enemy, know your stuff. The last part of this is the to battle part, okay? To battle, yes, we're headed off to battle, which means at the tournaments, what can you do for the purpose of tournament prep? Okay, the first part of this is the little stuff matters. Like, it matters if you show up with pens and flow paper and a stand and timers and your mouse and extra batteries for when your mouse inevitably dies before the finals or whatever. Like, this stuff all happens. Have jump drives. Have backup. If it's me, I bring like 3 bars of chocolate to tournaments because it like makes me sane, and dark chocolate actually decreases decision fatigue, which is a real thing. So making better decisions, go to the dark chocolate route. Okay, but whatever the set of stuff you need before the tournament is, like have that stuff ready. Okay, how many timers should you as a team have?
3.
4. Nice. 3 or 4, yeah. Because as we saw in the demo debate, like it matters if you're timing your partner, because you might notice your partner like isn't going to the advantage page. It's like good to notice if you've got a timer going as well, and you can actually tell your partner useful stuff like that. There's 2 of you. Stop talking. All right, so have your timers, have your pens, show up prepared. Judges will like you a lot more, and you will look far more credible if you don't just show up and borrow a bunch of pens and paper from your opponent, okay? The little stuff matters. Everything you do when you walk in a room is part of the decision that's going to get made. Unfortunate, but true, okay? Little stuff matters. The second part of this is that spare moments count a lot, okay? So I think the thing that Northwestern does maybe better than any other squad is like uses every second of a tournament in terms of preparation. So instead of like post round 1 and before round 2 going and chilling with your friends for like 5 minutes in the hallway, which while sort of fun, like not all that much fun, I don't know, you like talk about how round 1 was, and then somebody's like, oh wait, the pairing's out, and you like go back to your room, right? Instead, you could get like an extra 15 to 20 minutes of prep time where you could highlight your files a little bit more, or I don't know, how many of you guys have lost to the same argument twice? Yeah, like a bunch of you. Let's be fair here.
Me and Ty.
Okay, so like rule 1, and Arjun 1.0 is awesome at this, but like never lose to the same argument twice. Arjun 1.0 basically gets furious whenever he loses on an argument, we lose on an argument, and immediately starts cutting cards about it. Okay, so you just lost to this disad, and it stinks. But like way more productive than yelling at your judge or going off and ranting to your friends is like cut some cards to answer it. Because it's probably really stupid for the most part, and you could probably find some really good evidence that responds to that argument. Okay, so in the 20 minutes between rounds, you could be using that really productively. If you don't have an immediate idea, like you didn't just lose that round and you feel like you had all the evidence you wanted, you were on top of things, I always have a running to-do list for a tournament. I'm like, here's the 10 things that I wish I had gotten done before the tournament happened, but I know I can do in the downtime between hands. Like, incorporate the updates that my coach just sent out that are like new politics updates. Or make sure I've read all of the scouting documents from round 1. If you have people watching other rounds, like, find out what your best opponents were saying in that round and make sure you're prepared to respond to it. Okay? If you don't have people doing that kind of scouting, maybe you spend your time between round 1 and round 2 figuring out whether or not your best opponent is reading a new affirmative case, right? Going and finding those things out is way more productive and increases the amount of prep time you have a ton. Whatever's on her computer cannot be that interesting. No. Okay. Use your time during tournaments, okay? So whatever those updates are, highlight them. Have a to-do list so you can get that to-do list done in the in-between time between round 1 and round 2. Prepare against arguments you've lost to and find out what's happening with your opponents and make sure you're prepared against that, right? So that goes for between rounds, that goes for after rounds. There's a bunch of time at debate tournaments that turns into a lot of dead time where you're not really doing much. You're like going home and watching TV for a while before you fall asleep. It's like maybe use those 20 or 30 minutes to get organized on whatever happened that day. Okay, so there's a ton of tournament prep time that can happen during the tournament that whatever you did not quite get done in time, you can accomplish. Make your to-do list. Okay, that's my prep lecture. Does anybody have questions?
Well, I got questions now.
You can shoot me an email if you want. Questions about tournament prep? Yeah.
In actual prep time in a tournament, how can we use that efficiently?
How to use your in-round prep time efficiently? This probably isn't in a different lecture, so I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, so the first thing is everybody has 20 minutes of prep. It's not 10, it's 20. You get to prep during your partner's prep. Your partner gets to prep during your prep. You should always be using that time. So as a 1A, this is the question you're asking? Yeah, okay. So as a 1A, Flora actually asked me yesterday about 1AR prep. Like, how do you minimize the amount of time you spend prepping for the 1AR? Okay, I start prepping as soon as the 2AC stops. So that means 2AC cross-X, I'm not hovering around my partner waiting to answer the questions for them because guess what? They probably wrote the app and know it better than I do. So 3 minutes of 2AC cross-X. However long it takes the 2N to prep, right? During the 2NC, I'm trying to prep my 1AR, but for the most part, I'm flowing. During the 2NC cross-X, that's another 3 minutes of prep. During the 1NR prep time, if they take it, which they're stupid if they do, right? I'm doing prep. Those might be public forum people. Fair. Okay, so can't really say anything about this, but the amount of prep time you have is double, and you should be using every second of that. It also includes the cross-X's that you're not involved in. Keep one ear open for your partner actually messing things up, which most of you guys think it's all the time, and it's actually 1% of the time. So keep an eye out for that, but otherwise you should be using all of the moments that you possibly have for preparation. The second part of using your in-round prep well is don't prep things you don't have to. So if you know how to do the case and you can make sure you're not going to drop stuff, do you really need to write down, yes, environmental decline causes extinction? Probably not. Just make sure you're answering the arguments on the flow. You don't always have to write down every word of whatever it is you want to say. Okay? The third part of that is most of your prep in the round is going to matter a lot based on the prep you did before the tournament. So having a bunch of 2AC blocks ready to go really reduces the amount of time your 2AC prep takes. having 1NCs already constructed like this really reduces the amount of 1NC prep you have to take when somebody breaks a new app. Having 2NC blocks, how many of you guys make 2NC blocks as 2Ns? Yeah, like some of you guys. Okay, so is there ever an end to the number of 2NC blocks you could do?
No.
Like, no, never. Okay? So like every time at the end of a debate, while Arjun's off cutting cards for whatever thing we just lost on, like make more 2NC blocks. Or if you just lost a neg debate, whatever argument you just lost on, you should probably write a 2NC block to answer that argument on whatever the position is you went for immediately, because you just lost on it, so you obviously don't have the goods. Okay? So getting your 2NC blocks ready to go is really super important. And the fourth part about using your prep time efficiently, so your prep before the tournament really changes how much prep you use in the round. But the fourth part of this is, like, get good at paperless. It really matters. Okay, so, like, handful of paperless tips that I've noticed massively reduce my prep time. Okay, split screen. How many of you guys split screen your stuff? Like a few of you? Okay, for me it's Control-Alt-Left arrow.
Wait, do you mean like this?
Yeah, like that. Like, I mean, like, split screen of your file and your speech.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, like, Control-Alt-Left arrow and Control-Alt-Right arrow are what does it for me, and it sends your document to the left half or the right half of your screen.
For Windows now, you can drag it that way and like.
You can just drag it and snap to it.
Maybe it's Windows left. Yeah, the drag thing is awesome. So,
it snaps into place.
yeah, so it's depending on who you are.
Take control.
Left or right makes more sense for you, but I always put my speech on the right,
Up there.
and then I like all of the files that I'm pulling out of over here. Okay? It's really easy because then you can tell whether or not something you sent from the files to the speech actually worked. Okay, real talk. How many of you guys Control-C, like, copy and paste your stuff into speeches?
You should be better than that.
How many of you guys are,
Okay.
like, let's be real, how many of you are copying and pasting?
I don't like that.
I just only definitely
saving the option of putting a bunch.
Okay. So we're, like, doing a lot of copying and pasting.
No.
Okay?
I'm so efficient about it though.
I'm potential.
Okay, so, like, I will confess that
Prep time.
as someone who spent 8 years of my life doing paper debate, I was not particularly good about transitioning to paperless. I survived it, but I wasn't really good at new habits. You gotta get rid of the copy and paste. You just have to. Whatever your shortcut key is, figure it out, practice it. Like, practice on paperless makes a huge difference. But you should just practice prep 2NCs and practice prep 2ACs. Let's imagine this was the 2AC. How fast can I pull all my blocks, right? So that requires just clicking one spot and hitting whatever key it is that sends it from your file to the speech. Okay, get good at paperless. It really matters. I kind of think a mouse just massively changes things, so everyone should have an external mouse if you can. And preferably one with multiple keys, because honestly, programming in different keys to do the send to speech thing is awesome. So if it doesn't just have the like left click, right click, but has like side buttons, I actually think it makes a big difference.
By the way, Peyton, no one in your lab should be doing copy and paste because I spent an hour with this.
Yeah, he did. Ricardo literally spent an hour with us showing us how to do all the short.
Good.
I don't have good language. All you do is push the button right here.
Yeah.
I like that one.
I'm basically going to make everyone who debates in front of me show me their computer while they're prepping. Oh, and spill all my stuff everywhere. So I can make sure you're not copying and pasting. Haha.
I don't want to debate.
And your flows. I know. It's very intimidating.
Did you screen the flows?
Yes. We'll talk about it in lab. Yeah.
How do like what other than the control alt and left button can I
I
push?
just cursed here, but that's right. Tails left. That.
Oh, maybe I lied. Maybe it's not even Control Alt at all.
That's sun stuff. It's the
Oh, that's true. Depending on your thing. So yeah, I'm just so wrong about this. It's ridiculous. Yeah, Windows left and Windows right. Mac people, I have no idea.
Yeah, Mac people, you have to. It's like a button. It's like you gotta keep tapping it in. Like all the windows will pop up like this and like that.
Yeah, you guys have all kinds of like swooshy things you can do on your keypad. I don't really understand that at all.
What?
For like left and right and basically everything. It's just really confusing. Okay, so being good at paperless really changes how your prep time happens. Having your partner not prep like whole flows for you, but maybe pull cards if you're getting ready for a 1AR. Right? Good ways to reduce prep time. Other questions? Time to pick my brain.
Nothing? We're good at tournament prep? We feel prepared?
How can I be you?
Yeah.
How can I
Like,
be
is that
It's
like
really weird.
no, like I meant like your debate. Hey, I meant like your debates.
I understand.
Like legit spread.
Yeah, legit.
I mean, like we have 15 minutes.
Not like watered down.
Speed read.
We don't have 10 minutes.
Stretch. Just stretch.
We
Yeah,
just
I
do
like
what
full
see.
speed.
Are there any questions relevant to prepping
Yeah.
for a tournament?
Do we have constructive
I'll do
questions?
speed reading.
Speed reading.
This is your open forum. This is the only lecture I give at camp, so if you have questions for me, this is your shot.
Take me through the second lecture.
They know how to
Alright.
They did a 10-minute.
Can I leave it? Let them leave early? No.
My class gonna work on today.
Yeah.
They got like 15 minutes.
You guys have
Yeah, until 11:30.
What?
No one ever stays till
I know, right? You say so, that's it.
Yeah, we can probably edit around now.
Alright. People are welcome to read.